This week in Rivian news, we have some new information about the upcoming quad motor for Gen 2 that's just around the corner, a $1.2 billion raise by Rivian, and some great new software updates, including an amazing new energy app, some new foundational stuff for autonomy, and a controversial multi-factor drive that I think the community and Rivian are kind of blowing it on how they're talking about it. Plus, we get a sneak peek later this year of some software due for dual motor vehicles, which is by far and away the best-selling vehicle that Rivian has, that I think will dramatically improve the quality of life for driving performance, suspension, and some other cool things on dual motor vehicles. So let's go ahead and dive right in. First, we have the quad motor. Originally, Rivian launched with a quad motor that was developed by Bosch and then put inside of Rivian vehicles. As they got further down the line and increased their overall production, they added their own in-house motor for their dual motor variant. When they launched Gen 2, they got rid of Bosch and went in-house only with both dual and tri-motor configurations all designed in-house. But they also had previewed a year ago a quad motor design with tons of performance that even outpaced the prior quad, that it just creates insane amounts of torque, horsepower, and a 0 to 60 around 2.5 seconds. Recently, Out of Spec had a long but excellent factory tour in Normal, Illinois that showed all kinds of bits and pieces and gave some interesting takeaways about Rivian's improvement to production overall. During that tour, there was actually several instances where there was a quad motor that was clearly seen both in the launch green color with performance wheels, as well as a cool storm blue quad motor that looks like it has the dune wheels on it. So I think that we're very, very close to quads if they're already rolling through the factory and being produced. My big takeaway from this overall behind the scenes of the factory tour is that Rivian is really taking the continuous improvement to heart, and they've seen big changes since January, where they've dramatically increased the quality of vehicles coming off the line and reduced the number of vehicles that need additional inspection or rectification after coming off the line, but before being shipped out to customers. This laser focus on both efficiency and quality off the line is exactly what I've been asking for from Rivian to help alleviate some of their overall service issues, and these are supposedly measurably improved. So if you're getting a new Rivian, I'm really excited to see and hear from you about if you've actually noticed quality improvements from the day you take delivery. Both of our vehicles were very early in the Gen 2 process, and early cars in a process like that tend to have more problems. So if you've bought a recent Rivian, let me know down in the comments below. Did it come pretty much flawless from the factory? Or did you have a few issues that service had to get squared away for you after you took delivery? Now, clearly, in this tour, there's a lot of activity and excitement as they prepare for Rivian R2. There are things like overall line improvements by making the R2 one single long line instead of the R1, which essentially snakes back and forth through the existing production line, and just a number of things that they've taken to heart and taken those lessons to deploy those into the production of Rivian R2. Now, during this tour, as I mentioned before, several quad motors cropped up in production, but they couldn't exactly call them out specifically. I definitely saw a launch green color with performance wheels, a storm blue quad with dune wheels, and overall, I'm excited for this, not necessarily for the performance itself, which should be amazing, but I'm actually excited because it should come with a few things, notably as a 2026 model year that includes native NACS, or essentially the Tesla plug. But what other tweaks do you think we'll find in the 2026 model year vehicles? I think that we're going to be seeing some actual reviews from people who got early access to the quad here very, very soon. So I'm stoked to see what it comes with when it actually ships off the line and into customer hands. Next, we have plug and charge for a brand new network. You may have been hearing more and more about the network called Ionna. It's actually backed by a consortium of different auto manufacturers, not including Rivian, to invest and build a great third-party network that any EV owner can use and enjoy. They seem to be approaching this in the right way by having clean, often covered charging stalls, high energy output, and it usually has a bathroom as well as convenience like vending machines and things of that nature. This is really what most people are looking for when they're going on a road trip and looking for a fast charger. It really amazes me that more networks have not copied what is essentially the gas station model, where you have convenience, you have coverage, and you have, all importantly, a window wiper to get the bugs off of your windshield. Now, while this is a consortium of brands that are not Tesla, and Rivian is not joining that consortium, what Rivian is doing here is adding plug and charge later this summer. I'm taking a road trip really soon, so unfortunately it's not going to be ready in time for me, but I am excited to see more and more chargers be added to plug and charge, because the best experience in an EV is when you can pull right up, not pull out your phone, not pull out an app, just take the cable off the dispenser, plug it into your car, and let it rip. Letting it charge the card that you have on file with Rivian, and just going on about your day. Ionna comes oftentimes equipped with 400 kilowatt charging dispensers, including dual vehicles that can both charge at 200 kilowatts each. Many of their dispensers have both CCS and NACS plugs at every single site, so you won't have to fumble around with adapters or anything like that. I'm really excited to see this come to more people, but I'm also excited to see Ionna roll out more charging stations, especially here on the West Coast. When you look at their map of locations, it's primarily east and south, which is where I'm taking a road trip this summer. But again, unfortunately, I won't be ready for the plug and charge. If I do pass one though in my travels, I will give it a go and see if I can't grab some additional content there to give you a sneak peek about what it looks like firsthand. Next is news about Rivian generating $1.2 billion in green bonds as an additional raise. Rivian's previous bonds are due in full in 2026, which has pressured them to sign for new bonds. These new funds are expected to close in mid-June for a total of $1.2 billion. It was originally reported to be around $2 billion, so I'm happy to see this number actually be smaller. Raising this cash in and of itself isn't bad as an alternative to selling additional shares to generate additional funds. However, the effective interest rate of these green bonds is at 10%, and that is a bit eye-opening. This high interest rate means that financial institutions see Rivian as a riskier investment, and these green bonds will mature in 2031, which is 3 years after the Georgia plant is expected to open. So hopefully Rivian's ability to repay this in full is really set in they can pay these off early and try to avoid some of that interest. Rivian's current best bet for liquidity is continuing to hit the milestones for the Volkswagen joint venture deal that unlock additional funds out of that $5.8 billion deal. Shipping the Rivian R2 to customers has to be the #1 priority, as sales of luxury vehicles slump in North America in the eye of the joint venture with Volkswagen, where the underpinnings of R2 will be important to the entire Volkswagen Auto Group fleet, not to mention any other OEMs that may come to Rivian and Volkswagen in the future to purchase their components, their ECUs, and the firmware that goes along with it. Next, we have the latest release for Rivian software, 2025.18. One of the best parts of a software-defined vehicle is that you get regular updates. Tesla really paved the way with this, and Rivian is pretty much the only other company that does it with such regularity. This is a major energy app upgrade with preconditioning on demand, better notifications about charge level to continue your trip, improved charging curves specifically for Gen 2, but also for the max pack of Gen 1. A display of vehicle perception has been improved as well across both Gen 1 and Gen 2, with additional features again coming to Gen 2, as well as a whole suite of overall stability and responsiveness improvements. However, as great as the Energy app is, which comes loaded with lots of data about your overall charge curve, how you're using your energy, how you're regaining your energy, as well as great tips and feedback that should be particularly stellar for first-time EV owners, one thing the software update comes with that's a little bit, well, up in the air is their multi-factor drive. Both the community and Rivian themselves have failed to explain the use case of why this feature is compelling. While it's very secure from a technical level, where it functionally can generate a unique key or a unique prompt on your Apple Watch or your phone to approve every single drive, it's really technology in search of a problem. However, there is a problem that this technology does solve if actually communicated to customers about when the best time to use it would be. And with a few additional tweaks from Rivian, I think it could be much more useful still. First of all, let's just talk about how it works and the concept of it as an overall feature. When you enable this feature, it requires you to do a confirmation every single time you drive. And that regular use frankly sounds pretty annoying. There are legitimate edge cases that could be problematic, such as areas with low cell reception or damaged phone, areas where you may find yourself with a car you can't use because you cannot simply use the car key or the key fob to get your vehicle going without approving the two-factor authentication. The core issue is explaining that the actual problem that this solves and when it would be useful, as opposed to the technology itself being the problem. Some use cases where I think that multi-factor drive could actually be very useful is in long-term parking, like when you go to the airport and you're going to be going on a trip, or even when you leave your car at home for an extended period of time. What makes this particular scenario great is it adds that heightened level of security without annoying or adding friction to you as the user. By enabling this in those specific circumstances, your car is more secure than ever before, so even if someone broke into your home and stole a key to your car, they could not steal it without authenticating through the app. But you wouldn't want this enabled day in and day out in regular use. What would be great is if there was 4 changes, some smaller than others, to improve the overall clarity and execution of this feature. First, I would love to see some parental controls where the car owner must approve for certain drivers when this is enabled. So if you have a teenage driver or some sub-driver, you could flag them as requiring authentication from the actual owner of the vehicle. perhaps that authentication would approve for a certain period of time. The second component is I wish it had automatic time-based controls, such as enabled automatically between maybe the hours of 1 and 4 a.m. on weekdays for added security when at home, without interfering with you when you're actually trying to use the vehicle in your normal day-to-day use. I would also like to see this bundled with a set of defaults for something like airport mode, with reduced energy consumption and the increased security features of multi-factor drive. Similar to how car wash mode has special features and behaviors when you're in a specific application, such as washing your car, or even something like all-terrain mode where you can have the car react differently for suspension, height, handling, and things like that. I think that creating this overall bundle for this long-term storage scenario could actually optimize a significant portion of the vehicle in addition to increasing the overall security. The fourth change that I would like to see is an optional sort of in-between phase. I wish that they would offer a simple permanent pen-to-drive mode as an option for users who want some level of additional security but don't want to have a random generated pen that can be generated on your phone or have to approve from their watch each and every time that they get into the car. By having a set pen, you're basically creating a two-factor piece that you can memorize and quickly get through. So instead of having to wait for a delay for it to come onto your watch through multi-factor drive, or to then go into the app and have it generate the code, you reduce the complexity and you reduce the randomness. And it means that if your phone was damaged in a low service area, you could type in a preset number that you know in the back of your head so that you could get your car driving again, while still getting many of the same security benefits that you would get from having that two-factor authentication. The main difference being it's not multi-factor, where they'd have to actually generate a unique code each time. I think this would eliminate a lot of the edge cases, give a lot of the upside that they're trying to accomplish with this feature, while minimizing the overall downside in many, many cases. For those who are most concerned, there is still a time and a place for multi-factor drive under the circumstances I've outlined before. And I think this could be brought even further with something like I said, an airport mode. So hopefully Rivian can take a look at this feature and think about both the more simplistic way that is more useful with less friction in more scenarios, as well as thinking about the domain of what they're trying to solve here with this multi-factor drive, so that they can actually execute it and let customers dial it in, so that they can get the added security of multi-factor drive when it makes sense, but get it out of their way when they're trying to use the vehicle on a more regular basis. And lastly, we have dual motor drive changes that were previewed in a second out-of-spec video. Out-of-spec has been on fire lately with these very lengthy, in-depth tours of now both the Normal, Illinois location as well as the California location. It's an over 2-hour long video, and I highly recommend you watch this as well if you have the time. But since not everyone does, one thing I wanted to call out from this, outside of all the great autonomy features, software processes, and testing that they go through, is that they actually previewed specifically a new drive mode for all-wheel drive and a change in the way that they're thinking about how the car operates so they can retain their high EPA ratings and maximum range, but also give drivers more control over their car. Our vehicles are dual max vehicles, and so I'm particularly excited to see this, and I think it's going to give us the best of what we need out of the vehicles. My biggest complaint with the overall drive modes is actually not the overall power, because I actually believe that the base dual motor vehicle has tons of power for the average user and is plenty performant while still giving you a lot of efficiency. But it does do this automatic disconnect that there's really no way to get out of, and it's kind of annoying with the suspension settings. So if you're trying to get into a situation where you would like a little bit more performance out of the car by having it retain an all-wheel drive mode full time, and you would like to get it out of auto suspension mode, your options have been pretty limited to date. You'd have to put it in something like snow mode or all-terrain mode or rally mode in order to get that all-wheel drive to stay engaged. But when you did that, you were often giving up components of your advanced driver assistance systems, or you were changing how the car operates in another way that is less desirable. Plus, the suspension was always going back to auto pretty much every time you drove the car, unless you had dog mode on that was keeping the car awake and seeing it as the same session. Well, the preview that Rivian gave out of spec is actually a pretty fair overall implementation. Up until now, only the Tri and soon-to-be Quad motors had an all-purpose mode as their default, with a conserved mode as a long-range efficiency option. And effectively, the conserved mode is what all-wheel drive vehicles have been doing, but they've been calling it all-purpose. So when on conserved mode on the higher-end trims, those vehicles on Gen 2 do an automatic disconnect and reconnect each and every time so that they are front-wheel drive as often as possible, but they're all-wheel drive during takeoff or during heavy acceleration. So effectively, the Tri and Quad motors have been all-wheel drive by default, but they have a mode in conserve where they try to be front-wheel drive as often as possible, and they're only all-wheel drive when in conserve during initial takeoff or when you stomp on the accelerator, asking the car to give you more acceleration. Conversely, you have the all-purpose mode with dual motor, which is acting just like the conserve does on the tri-motor vehicle. And what they're doing here is they're actually getting these vehicles in better alignment. So what they're doing now is that they're going to introduce conserve mode to dual motors, and that will be the default mode that it's in. So in the default version, it will operate exactly how the vehicle always has. It's just called conserve. With this new version of all-purpose, what they're basically doing is they're bringing consistency across the line so that if you put the vehicle into all-purpose mode, you will now get a full-time locked all-wheel drive mode out of dual motor. And they said if you go into that mode and you've changed the suspension settings to, let's say, standard, high, or low, it will remember that next time you come back to all-purpose mode. So that effectively means that while the key on scenario for the dual motors will be the same as it's always been, where it is trying to be two-wheel drive as often as possible to maximize range, as well as the suspension being into auto, which helps them retain their EPA settings and ratings, you can very quickly put it into all-purpose mode and get what I think most drivers are going to really appreciate if you're on a windy back mountain road or you just prefer the feel of an all-wheel drive vehicle, including the suspension. So considering that the auto suspension makes our dog sick in the back of our vehicles, having this is a really great one-click option. Rivian did state that this is just something that they are looking at and trialing and testing and looking for feedback and trying to refine it. So it is very likely that something may change by the time it hits production, but this seemed pretty production ready in my eyes and is likely to be very close to what the final solution is. However, in order to keep that EPA rating, they will have to have it default back to conserve if you've not used the vehicle for 4 hours or more. So if you've gone for a drive and you let the car sleep, next time you come back to it, it will be back in conserve. Thankfully though, a few taps and all of your settings will be restored. And if you're only stopping for, let's say, a charging session or a meal or a bathroom break, the vehicle should remember between those shorter breaks. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. And if you are interested in potentially a weekly Rivian and EV newsletter, I've started a new newsletter that you can actually subscribe to down below or by going to this link, which is travisketchum.com/email. So what do you think? Are you excited about these software updates? Are you excited about the Quad potentially coming? Drop a comment down below and let us know. And check out this video that YouTube thinks you're going to enjoy. Until next time, stay curious.